Alright, so there has not been an honest-to-goodness tag in this community for a while, and I'm moving fast here because I want to get this video done. There's not been an honest-to-goodness tag in this community for a while. I'm sure there was the Ice Bucket Challenge, but that was not in this community, and it was not the type of tag that we've had in the past. So I figured I would start one. And okay, since it's Halloween, and since I got this idea, my tag that I'm starting is that if you get tagged, you have to make a video explaining your vampire plan. Now, your vampire plan, as opposed to your zombie plan, which is similar, superficially so. Your zombie plan is what you plan to do in the case of a zombie apocalypse. Your vampire plan is not what you plan to do in the case of a vampire apocalypse. Your vampire plan is what you plan to do if you are turned into a vampire. For example, my vampire plan. I will explain and then I will tag some people to explain their own. My vampire plan has basically 3 steps. The first step is to settle down and create a sustainable lifestyle for myself. And here's how I go about that. In order to avoid killing people, and in order to remain an ethical vampire, I have to okay, I'm assuming that I need, as a vampire, that I need 10 pints of blood every single night. Now, that is a somewhat uncharitable assumption, because that's the amount of blood in a human body. So I'm assuming that if I were to feed off of one person a night, I would suck them completely dry. Now, in order to take that amount of blood safely, because what I would want to do is, in order to take it safely, I would want to spread it across several different people. And so I calculated that if I take 2 pints of blood from each person, then I can feed on 5 people every night. And I will then not be able to feed on them again safely for 8 weeks. So my first instinct when I thought of this was to get devotees and, rotate through them. But in order to do that, I would need 280 such devotees, I calculated. So that's probably not going to work. So the plan I came up with to do instead is that I would have to take, basically I would have to feed on at least some non-consenting people. And that would mean kidnapping them, and that would be difficult. But not impossible, I think. And so basically every night I would, sneak into the homes of 5 people or something, drink about 2 pints of blood from them, and then move along. I would probably still try to get at least a few devotees if I wanted to, and in order to do that, I would just have to find, some goths or something, I figure. And especially if... So, okay. Once I've settled down, and once I'm at the point where I'm sustainably able to do that, step 2 is where I get a little bit more unique, I think, in my vampire plan, because I don't just want to settle down and feed on people ethically. I want to change the world. And step 2 in working toward that is to is to develop, basically, in theory, I could just wait till this happens of its own accord, but I would want to do this myself, to develop, or at least do whatever I could to speed this up, to develop some kind of blood substitute. Either through cloned blood, or if this already existed in the form of animal blood, then I would skip right to this. Then I would skip right past this step and skip to step 3. But cloned blood, I would go for. If it has to be from a human, then what I would do is I would basically clone the blood, clone the person's blood, take it from them if I have to, and then immediately by transfusion put more blood back in. And that would hopefully be sustainable. That would hopefully allow me to, basically at that point, allow not only me to feed with a clear conscience, but allow as many other vampires as possible to feed with a clear conscience. And this is where we get to step 3, because step 3 is world domination. Here's how it works. My ultimate goal is to get to a point, through blood substitutes, through transfusions and cloned blood, etc., to get to a point where the highest possible proportion of vampires can exist relative to humans. So what I would do is I would basically, after I was at that point where I was confident that this was sustainable, I would start turning people, and get them to turn people, and get them to turn people. And basically it would be Turnapalooza, and we'd keep going until a pre-calculated number of vampires existed relative to the human population. I would want the ratio to be at least 3 vampires to every 1 human. If possible, way more. If possible, way more. If possible, I would want that number to be as high as possible. I want it to be much higher with 3. If it could be 100, that would be amazing. But that might not be possible, especially at first. And basically what I would do is, through my vampire army, I guess, I would create a new society. And here's how it would work. And here's the beauty of it. Because, okay, vampires already do not die. They are immortal. They experience, in theory, no death, no disease, much less suffering, etc. Now, my goal... Now, okay. Humans would still need to exist for 2 reasons. First off, I'm assuming that I need them to feed. If not, I would just turn everyone. If clone blood was acceptable, I would turn... Well, I wouldn't turn everyone, because the second purpose would still need to be filled, but I would turn almost everyone. If clone blood was just acceptable by itself, or if animal blood was acceptable by itself, I would turn almost everyone, and I wouldn't need humans to feed. If I did need humans to feed, I would need humans to feed, and I would find a way to do that without killing them through various clone blood transfusion stuff I've already talked about. Okay. The other thing I would need them for is for continued reproduction. Because vampires would still get caught in the sunlight. Vampires would still stake each other. In theory, vampires live forever, but not really. Even though it's an improvement because they live much longer than humans do. So, here's how my ultimate I've taken over the world vampire society would work. Every human is born and grows up from the youngest age possible is going through that procedure, again, if it's necessary, to feed vampires. And this is just a thing that they do every day or every couple days or however often it's safe. Meanwhile, their parents are still alive and probably still human. We'll get to that in a little bit. and are raising them. And we keep this going until they grow up, and then they have kids of their own. And I think I could foster, I think I could foster a culture in which, the continual self-replacement of the human population would be relatively easily done. And basically how it would work then is, after they had all the children that they needed to, in order to match the number of vampires who are getting caught in the sunlight, getting staked, etc., they would be turned. And so then they would get to live immortal. So you could argue that there's an oppressed class, but the oppressed class is like the equivalent of children. It's temporary. And you are, as a human, sure, you're born a human, and it sucks, perhaps. I would try to make it suck as little as possible, but perhaps it sucks for 50 years, and then you get to become a vampire and live for thousands. And that would be it. And, of course, it may at some point become possible to clone humans, and so not need to keep alive a breeding population for that purpose. And that might be helpful if the number of humans that are needed, if the number of humans that will keep the population from expanding is, is so low that it's not an adequate breeding population of humans. If vampires die at such a low rate that, you only lose you lose less than 10,000 of them, or if vampires die at such a low rate that a breeding population of 10,000 humans, which is the minimum, is basically too many, then, and assuming each one gets to be turned, that causes the population to expand over time, which is not what we want, cloning humans might be what we prefer to do. Because cloned humans, I'm assuming, they would have adequate blood. There's no reason they shouldn't. And so, that's my vampire plan. Step 1, sustainability through distributing feeding across multiple humans. Step 2, blood substitute. Step 3, take over the world and establish a utopia in which every person is a human for about 50 years. They reproduce, they feed some vampires, and then they are turned and get to join the vampire population. And even if you want to argue that the humans are oppressed up till that point, which, kind of, that doesn't last forever. And at least after a generation or so, every vampire will have gone through the same thing. It'll be like reaching adulthood. It'll be a rite of passage. And, So, as for tagging people, let's see, I want to think of people who I think will have interesting vampire plans. I'm going to tag Lasoyo, who I always tag with these, partially because I know he'll respond, but also partially because I think he will have an interesting vampire plan. I will also tag Deckrash, Brandon. Prudent Discourse, you've never participated in one of these. And let's see, one more. Wolfwing 1. I don't know that I'm still subscribed to you. I think I unsubscribed to you a while back, and I've not bothered to resubscribe since. So I'm going to rectify that as soon as I can, at least as soon as I get home. So what is your vampire plan? I will send this video to you as soon as I get home. See ya.